All right, guys, welcome back to Unit 3, Outcome 2, Key Knowledge 5. And this video is all about training, which is probably something you will be familiar with. Well, you will be familiar with if you've ever had a job. You must have had some form of training, and some of what I'll talk about here will be familiar to you. You will have experienced it yourself firsthand. So here is our study design snapshot. Here is what we're looking at here. You can see training options, including on-the-job and off-the-job training, and the advantages and disadvantages of both. So that's the focus, the on-the-job, the off-the-job, and then we're going to look at the pros and the cons of each of those. So first of all, what's the importance of training, I guess? Training is motivation strategy. We looked at that in the last key knowledge dot point. Now we're going to basically expand. I mentioned in that video that we're going to be expanding on it when we get to this key knowledge dot point. So why? Why is it important? Why do we cover it? Look, we live in a really, really highly business competitive global economy these days, and an absolute essential, vital asset to any business is their people. Like a business is only as good as the people that it employs. Like a sports team, your footy team is only as good as the people that play for it. Also, training helps people achieve their own objectives and the business achieve its objectives. Training can be expensive, as we kind of talk about a little bit, but basically training is an investment that the business makes. Okay, so what the business is doing when it's putting its employees through training is investing in their human resource assets. Okay, so you pay money up front to do the training, and hopefully in the long run, you get that money back. A little bit like an advertising campaign. It's going to cost you money, but you do it for a reason. That reason being that hopefully in the future, that's going to lead to increased sales, which actually, that increase in dollar amount is going to be more than what the advertising campaign cost you. Same with training. So the idea is you train your people, but in the long run, you get more back. So a definition just of training, first off, before we get into the on-the-job and the off-the-job. Process of providing an employee with the skills and the knowledge to be able to perform their job more effectively and or more efficiently. Okay, pretty straightforward, I think. What training do we actually need to offer? So if you're running a business, you need to think about, what do I need to offer to my employees? What do I need to train them in? So what you do is what's called a training needs analysis. And this isn't just like a one-off process that you do at the start of the business or once a year or anything like that. It's kind of an ongoing thing that's happening in the background all of the time. 3 parts to it. First of all, an organizational analysis. So basically looking at the bigger picture here, where as a business should we be focusing our training efforts in order to achieve whatever objectives it is that we're trying to achieve. So the large scale, big picture stuff, looking at the business as a whole. Then you kind of look through a microscope a little bit of the business, and then we do what was called a task analysis. So where we look at each individual job within the business to see what skills are needed to do that job. And then obviously design training programs to make sure the employees could actually, gain those skills so they could do the jobs that you have within the business. And then finally, a person analysis. So now we're looking at each individual person to work out what training that particular person needs. Okay, so now getting into what it said in the study design, on the job and off the job. So we start with on the job training. Definition here, learning whilst you are performing the job within the workplace. So that's the kind of training that I would imagine most of you, if you've gone into fast food or retail, that sort of thing, that's what most of the training that you've received to this point probably involved on the job. So you learned while you were actually doing the job. So on-the-job training allows employees to become familiar with the actual equipment they're going to use in their role and the actual process that they'll be carrying out in the scope of doing their job. Typical methods are used in this, and again, some of you will have experienced these: coaching or mentoring by a more experienced colleague, job shadowing, or job rotation. Job shadowing, just following someone around, watching what they do, and then ultimately you'd be effectively copying that. And the job rotation is where they move you around different departments or different stations, so you kind of get experience in a bunch of different areas. Off the job training. Formalized learning process where you're taken out of the work situation and the training happens in a separate location. Now, this green bit here is kind of important. Note that the location might still be within the business premises, but it's happening away from where the actual work is done. And this is important because textbooks even treat this differently. Often the definition that textbooks give is something along the lines of off-the-job training is it's training that takes place away from the workplace. I disagree with that. It can happen still within the workplace, but just not where the actual work is done. So, for example, McDonald's, most of the training for a crew member at McDonald's would be done on the job, while you're doing the job. But there might be situations where they take you back into the crew room or a separate space, still within the building, but away from the actual kitchen and the front tills. And you might learn some skills there as well. Or if you think about teacher training, teachers constantly are going through training. We have to maintain our status as a teacher and to stay registered. Now, a lot of the training that we do is still in the actual classroom. So after school, often we have training courses. They might be in the classrooms that we actually use to teach classes in. So it's actually then in the same location that we do the job, but it's not teaching classes. So hopefully you can see the difference. So a safer definition is to use the one here where you're taken out of the work situation and it happens in a separate location, not necessarily out of the business premises. For this one, typical methods that you can use: conferences, lectures, workshops, that sort of thing, classroom settings, simulations and role plays. Online learning is a much bigger thing these days, or even if you do a TAFE and uni course, or if your employee pays for you to do a course at TAFE or uni, that would be counted as off-the-job training as well. Now, I'm just going to talk you through an example here to kind of, actually says on the job, but it throws in both sorts to give you kind of a more of a practical example of how this kind of looks. So this is just LD Careers, okay? So this is an advert for their graduate training program. I believe they take graduates from pretty much any discipline. Very, very competitive program to get into, LD, and you can probably see why right there on the screen. Salary of 95,000 up to 185,000. So huge salary in retail. Aldi are the biggest payers in retail in Australia. In fact, I think most countries they operate in. Very, very high pressure. They expect a lot for the money. But if you're up for it, for the challenge, really, really good career in Aldi and very, very well paid. Okay, so what it takes to be a graduate area manager. So that's what they call you right off the bat, a graduate area manager. So blah, blah, blah. You can have a look at what's on the screen there, but I want to focus on you'll have exposure to serving customers on registers, managing sections in our distribution centre, undertaking site meetings. All of that stuff are examples of on-the-job training, okay? So with the LD training scheme, look, the majority of it is on the job. Pretty much straight away, and we'll look in a minute, they throw you into a store and you're just doing the job alongside the staff. Okay, that's how you learn most of it. And as we'll see, there are examples of off the job as well, but a lot of this scheme, you're thrown into a store, thrown in the deep end, and you just got to learn really, really quickly. So that's kind of how they do. And then you see a blue underlining there, developing your skills as a leader. That's probably the sort of stuff that's happening off the job. Okay, that's probably going to be more classroom-based stuff. So if we look at the details of this course, okay, so this is just from their website, okay, so it actually takes you through the program, takes you through week by week, and it tells you what the focus is during that period of time. So that's the first 32 weeks there, and then week 33 up to week 50. So you can see this is a 1-year program. Now, if we go back and look at that again and look at what it's talking about, we can kind of identify bits of on the job and off the job. So if you look at the first weeks 1 to 2, welcome to Aldi. Join forces with an experienced area manager who's going to mentor you throughout your training. You'll also receive the keys to your company car. So there's going to be elements of on and off. I'm assuming, look, there'll certainly be some classroom-based stuff, or they'll take you with other new graduates and you'll go through some kind of induction to Aldi program, which will be more classroom-based. And, you're going to learn about Aldi, about how they operate, so on and so forth. You may get thrown into a store there, I'm not sure. Certainly there's going to be some off the job and maybe a little bit of on the job as well. But if you look at weeks 3 to 7, your intensive in-store training starts now. on the floor shop experience, blah, blah, blah. That's on the job training. They're throwing you into a store. You're going to be learning as you go, probably through the other staff who are going to be less senior to you, but you are going to effectively be their manager. Weeks 8 to 15, learn aspects of running a successful Aldi store and manage every aspect of its operation. Again, a lot of that's going to be in the store, learning as you go, but there will certainly be elements where they bring you out of the store again into the classroom setting, probably with other training managers that joined at the same time as you, and do some classroom-based stuff as well. In fact, as I think about this is really, really similar to the scheme that I joined in McDonald's back in the mid-90s, where I joined as a graduate trainee manager. It was just like this. It was a fast track. The idea was I think it was 6 to 9 months, you could become a assistant manager. And this is from never having stepped foot in a McDonald's in your life. And again, there was some classroom-based stuff, but mostly you were working in a store. So 6 months, you could become an assistant manager. If you were good, within 12 months, you become a general manager of your own restaurant and then a regional manager. So I did that. I ended up at Macca's for 2.5, 3 years, I think. And I was ultimately a regional manager of 7 stores in the Manchester area. And when I think back, the program was really, really similar to what you're looking at here. So weeks 16 to 17, you consolidate your understanding by running a store. So you're back in a store, you're definitely on the job there. Weeks 18 to 19, you're going to the warehouse, so that's on the job. 20 to 27 on. Back 30 to 32, learning all aspects of what it takes to be an LD area manager. I'm imagining there's going to be some elements of off the job where you probably come back with some of those graduate trainees that you started with, and there'll be some classroom-based stuff there, and then so on and so forth. So in each of these different aspects of the training, you can identify elements of on and off the job, so that once you've finished your year, to become an LD, as they call it, an area manager, you're going to have experienced a lot of both, would be my guess. All right, now let's look at the advantages and disadvantages. As per the study design, that's what it says we need to know. So look, first off, on the job training, the advantages, and again, this is for, the compare questions, where you're throwing out advantages, discuss questions or compare. You can use this information to answer the discuss and the compare questions. So on the job training advantages, first off, you're being trained on the actual equipment that you're going to be using, or the tools that you're going to be using actually in the role. So that's good experience. An experienced supervisor is going to be present to supervise you through the process. You're going to be working while you're learning, so you actually become productive. So you're kind of contributing to the business whilst you're learning, whilst you're training. Okay, so day one, you might be a bit slow, but the idea is as you kind of train up and become more proficient and learn through the training, you're actually becoming more and more productive. So there's an element of productivity through the training, which is also in a minute obviously happens or doesn't happen through off the job because you're being taken out of the workplace. It's cost effective because it doesn't involve any external training organizations, which off the job often does. So it can be very, very expensive to hire trainers to come into the business. They charge a lot of money often. So if you're just doing on the job training, using your own employees to kind of mentor, coach and train, it's obviously could be cheaper. And it's actually also good experience for the trainer or the mentor in terms of their career development and potentially the motivation. So if you've got some really, really good employees, experienced team members who are really proficient in their job and they're looking for some extra responsibility, this is a really, really good way to motivate them and give them some career development for the future. Negatives. Look, the trainer might pass on bad habits and shortcuts. I guess once people become very proficient in a job, sometimes they have a tendency to kind of cut some corners, just to kind of be a bit quick. It might not necessarily have a negative impact once you're really proficient in a job, but they're the kind of corner cutting activities that you don't necessarily want to train into new employees. So there's a potential there. Of course, the way around that is just make sure you're selecting the right people to do the training and train them how to train. So you can get around that one, but it's just something to be aware of. And Second one, look, it also reduces the productivity of a potentially productive employee. So if you're using a really experienced, productive employee to do the training, you're taking them away from being productive themselves. So there's a negative impact on the productivity of the business there. But again, like I said, all of this stuff, there's a cost, there's a negative, but you're doing it for the good of the long term, in terms of the business achieving its objectives. Off-the-job training, external training organisations, this is the positives, often used, and therefore training is delivered by an absolute specialist or an expert. You're hiring them in for their knowledge, for their experience, for their expertise. No interruptions by workplace issues because you're doing it not in the workplace scenario, so you're not going to be interrupted by, for example, again, thinking about McDonald's, if you've got some training going on and things get busy, the training kind of falls to the wayside because everybody needs hands on deck and let's just deal with the situation. Let's reduce the queues, let's get the food out, let's serve the customers, and then we come back to the training once that's dealt with. Obviously, that doesn't happen when we're doing external training because there's no interruptions, by a busy period at work or something. Also, there's a potential for networking opportunities and information sharing with employees from other businesses, potentially. That's, of course, if you're doing training, not just for your business, but you may be sending some employees on a training course with employees from other businesses as well. So there's that kind of networking opportunity, which can be really handy. It can lead to official recognised qualifications. So, if you go to TAFE, or you don't even need to go to TAFE often, but, you can do your Cert 2, your Cert 3, your Cert 4. Some companies will pay for you to do a degree or a diploma. So you can actually get recognised qualifications, which is good for the employees for their future benefit. And again, it can increase the morale of the chosen employees because, look, the employees generally know if you're sent on a training course, particularly, an external one run by some kind of specialist or expert, it's expensive. So there's a sense of being valued by the business by dint of the fact that the business is willing to pay to send you to do this particular course. Negatives, the main one here is cost, I would say. Trainer fees, course fees, transport potentially if the course is not local to you. If it's further away, you might even need to pay for accommodation overnight for employees. So there can be a fairly hefty cost there, particularly in Australia if the training happens to be interstate. You might be looking at flights and all sorts of stuff. Lost productivity due to taking the people out of the workforce. Possible costs incurred in replacing the trainee whilst they're away training. So if you've taken people out, you might need to hire or bring other people in to cover their shift effectively. So there's kind of like a double cost. There's a cost of paying for the training, but there's also the cost of paying for someone to replace that person at work. And finally, what you need to be aware of, and again, there's kind of a get around here, but employees receiving training, learning new skills, and then leaving the business, and your competitors benefiting from that investment that you've made in those people. Okay, so the last thing you want to do is spend a fortune training people up, and then once they've received that training, they say, see you later, go and join the competition, and then that competitor reaps the rewards of all that training that you've provided to that employee. So the workaround here, or how you can minimize the risk, is by having development opportunities available alongside the training. So in other words, some kind of career progression for people so that once they've kind of taken a job as far as they can, and they may be getting a bit bored, there's the next level for them to move on to. So that's something we look at a bit later. But yeah, just the get around there. Don't let your competitors benefit from your investment by making sure you have somewhere for your employees to go, basically. And that is it for training, guys. Nice and easy, fairly quick one. I will see you in the next video for Key Knowledge 6. Cheers for now.